will read out the summary of the previous. Yesterday only we did, but still not very easy to remember. So I will read out the summary of the previous one, then we will do today's paragraph. So what he has said in this, so, this something, okay, this man has a vague idea that there is something which is controlling everything and which is, there is no ignorance there. So this something, not a non-existence, nothing or a nihil, okay, because those are the suggestions given by Buddhism and Mayavada. So not that, but there is something positive. Okay? This something is Satchidananda, which the Upanishads, and we have to been repeating. Okay? So, good morning, Shilpa.
Good morning, Rangadhar.
So this Satchidananda is an ultimate reality which is threefold. Okay? Though actually only one, just once again. Yeah. So it is threefold, but actually one. That's what he's saying. Existence, which is subtlest of substance, consciousness, force, and bliss. So this is what makes the ultimate reality. Our examination of the phenomenon of ignorance led us to consciousness, and that in turn is now leading us to force, Shakti, because manifestation is a product of consciousness deploying its force to create the world. So, we have been scrutinizing consciousness in all its aspects from chapter 5, page 428 to chapter 12, page 586. Then we say, we have then to look at force which creates the universe. But how does the force create the universe? It happens by tapas, by concentration of its chitta shakti to effectuate its own will by concentration. But what is tapas? It is heat, not to be noted penance, a bodily torture, mortification, as is often interpreted. It is certainly not penance, it is not bodily torture, not mortification of oneself, as is often interpreted. In fact, in India, the idea of subjecting the body to pressure of mortification was not current in yogic practices. It may have been possible in other, those who are not doing yoga, misunderstood by most, but in yogic practices, it is never there. The image of an egg was used in the ancient Indian scriptures, Brahmanda. The egg is hatched by heat and the bird, Purusha, emerges. It is a soul in nature. This is the image given. If we examine our own consciousness, we see that consciousness force applies itself in two ways, inwardly on itself and outwardly on others. The world, animate and inanimate. But to Satchidananda, this double action does not apply, as there is nothing outside itself. It's only one, so it cannot apply to itself. It is the all. It is the all. It is everything. Includes all, and there is nothing else existing besides it. There is another difference between human consciousness and the Satchidananda. In our case, we see the voluntary action is only a small part of the total energy spent on the individual being. The rest being involuntary, subconscious, and also superconscious. So, this is what he's saying. In our case, voluntary things. I want to drink a glass of water, voluntary. Okay? I am feeling hungry, involuntary. Okay? So there are so many things which you do. The heart beating is involuntary. Okay? The cramps coming on the muscles are involuntary. So these are all, both the things are there. This fact of conscious and this voluntary and non-voluntary, okay, has great consequences of practical importance. In Satchidananda, there is only voluntary action. There is no involuntary action since it is the all, integral, indivisible. So, very interesting and very telling point that in the superconscious, in Satchidananda, everything is willed. But in our case, there is a mixture of willed and unwilled, involuntary. Since it is all integral, the tapas. Okay. Then, 1 second. That's it. That's the main thing what he's saying. Yeah. Okay, so that is what he said in the previous one. Now we read today what we have to read, but here a question may arise. He has spoken about the everything being voluntary in the higher consciousness and in the lower consciousness mixture of voluntary and involuntary. So here a question may arise. So we have to start reading. So today, Yasmin, you have the text. Okay, Yasmin is
No, life divine I don't have.
right. Okay, so Suki can start reading.
Yes, I will read.
Go ahead.
But here, a question may arise, since there is a passivity in existence and in nature, as well as an activity, immobile status, as well as the kinesis. What is the place and role of this force, this power, and its concentration in regard to a status where there is no play of energy, where all is immobile? In ourselves, we habitually associate our tapas, our conscious force, with active consciousness, with energy in play and in internal or external act or and motion. That which is passive in us produces no action or only an involuntary or mechanical action, and we do not associate it with our will or conscious force. Still, since there too there is the possibility of action or the emergence of an automatic activity, it must have at least a passively responsive or automatic conscious force in it, or there is in it either a secretly positive or a negative and inverse tapas. It may also be that there is a larger conscious force, power, or will in our being unknown to us, which is behind this involuntary action. If not a will, at least a force of some kind, which itself initiates action, or else responds to the contacts, suggestions, stimulations of the universal energy. In nature also, we know that things are stable, inert, or passive are yet maintained in their energy by a secret and unceasing motion, an energy in action, upholding the apparent immobility. Here too, then, all is due to the presence of Shakti, to the action of its power in concentration, its tapas. But behind this, beyond this relative aspect of status and kinesis, we find that we have the power to arrive at what seems to us an absolute passivity or immobility of our consciousness, in which we cease from all mental and physical activity. There seem then to be an active consciousness in which consciousness work as an energy throwing up knowledge and activity out of itself, and of which, therefore, tapas is the character, and a passive consciousness in which consciousness does not act as an energy, but only exists as a status, and of which, therefore, absence of tapas or force in action is the character. Is the apparent absence of tapas in this state real, or is there such an effective distinction in Satchidananda? It is affirmed that there is. The dual status of Brahman, quiescent and creative, is indeed one of the most important and fruitful distinctions in Indian philosophy. It is besides a fact of spiritual experience.
Okay, very subtle, and we'll see what he's saying. So, to help us to understand this sentence, we will summarize the thing basically and get the basic idea of what he's saying. Then we will go into each sentence. What he's saying here. Okay. Now, I'm reading out the summary of what we just now read. Okay. It focuses, so it helps. Now, a question arises. In existence, which is the subtlest of substance, and also in nature, there is a passivity as well as an activity, a status and dynamism. We know that. Okay? Both the things are there, both up and down. At the higher level, passivity is more dominant and action is absorbed into the passivity. Silence is dominating the action in the higher. In the lower, it is action that is dominating the silence, but it is there, both are there. Okay? So after all, Himalayas are not moving, we don't see it moving, so there is an action of silence also. But we also know that there is a slow movement. Okay, so this is what he is saying. Both the things are there. Status as well as dynamism, both are there everywhere. And that corresponds to Chit and Shakti. Shakti is the dynamism and consciousness is the static condition. Since we are looking at force, we may ask, what is force doing in these states? What is it doing at the higher level? Silent. And what is it doing at the lower level? Fully active. Okay, this is what we are asking. In one, it is a creative movement. Okay, so just 1 second. Yeah. So, what is this force doing in these states? In one, it is creative movement. In the other, it is resting without movement. In the physical world, the force is going on creating. There is birth taking place everywhere. Birth of plants, birth of animals, birth of human beings. There is a constant creation going on in the physical world. But above, there is only consciousness and immutability. Okay? So there is no activity as such. Power is there, but it is held back. Okay? It is held back. Passivity and activity are both states of Shakti. Now he is saying, whether it is active or passive, they are both states of Shakti. In one case, it is moving, and in another case, it is held back. Just like the water behind the dam, for instance. You can't say that there is no Shakti in it. It is full of power, because the moment you release the water, you see it is gushing out with huge force. Okay? So, or I give another example also. You are running a 100-meter race, and you are on your mark. The judge means the official, the athletics official calls on your marks. So everybody goes on their marks, but they are not moving. But can you say that there is no force? Of course, it's all gathered force. So this is what Swami is saying. Passivity and activity are both states of Shakti. It can act and it can remain silent. Tapas is in action or at rest. Okay? Both are there possible. When we look at ourselves, all our actions, we associate with force and movement. Okay? Whether objective in the external world or psychologically subjective. When I'm thinking, my mind is moving. My vital also is moving from left and right. We like and we dislike, so there is movement always in our case. Okay? The force mobile in us produces action. The force at rest does not end in action. It is immobile. Okay? But force at rest may be producing action which is involuntary. This at our level. Okay? For instance, I have heart beats, blood circulation, sleep, okay? Walking. Even when we are walking, the muscles are, we are not using our muscles voluntarily. Automatically it is coming. Involuntary body movements, all the physical, mechanical habits, all this shows that involuntary, the tapas is acting. Okay? So, could these involuntary movements be originating from a passive force or perhaps a negative tapas? Negative tapas is saying, okay? So, is it coming? From where is it coming? The involuntary movements. Or again, could it be that a universal force is causing all movements in the individual being, including mind, life, and body? Now he is saying, we see also that in nature, all that seems stable and static is actually maintained in existence by an unceasing movement. We know that. For instance, matter and its atomic whirlings. Okay, that is one. And we also feel that the Himalayas are static, they are not moving. But that's not true. They do go. So he's saying, so whatever is our involuntary movements is being also created by force. Okay, but it's not that we are voluntarily doing it. So we also see that in nature, all that seems stable and static is actually maintained in existence by unceasing movement. One is the matter. Okay. We also see that the tree is not growing, or if you look at a flower, we feel that it is static. But actually it is not, it is slowly opening. If you do what is called time-lapse photography, you will see that there is a movement. Okay, and we have beautiful time-lapse photographies of flowers blooming. If you condense 2 hours of the flower blooming, slowly you don't see it blooming, but if you condense it by time-lapse photography, you will see it blooming beautifully in maybe 15 seconds. Okay, so that's what he's saying. Just because we don't see movement, it doesn't mean to say it is not there. Okay? We also see that in nature, all that seems stable and static is actually maintained in existence by an unceasing movement. Okay? There is also the individual consciousness that can enter a state where all action, mental, vital, and physical, ceases completely. Okay? When you go to the self, the Brahmic consciousness, everything is silent. Huh? You have a silent mind, you have silent, everything is silence. There is then a movement of tapas, creative energy, throwing up knowledge and activity out of itself, and another, a static poise of force where tapas seems to be passive. In the spiritual planes of consciousness, when you go up, you are in the Brahmic consciousness, which is static. Okay? So, does all this correspond to anything real in Satchidananda? Please ask him. Spiritual experience confirms the dual state of the Brahman, static and dynamic. So, now Srimati is asking, does all this correspond to anything real in Satchidananda? Spiritual experience confirms the dual state of Brahman, static and dynamic, okay? Saguna and Nirguna. So, this is what both the things are there. This is what up to this point he has said. So, he will associate static condition probably with knowledge, and the movement in the physical world, probably he will say that the ignorance could be there. So he is looking at all this, and one by one he is very well analyzing the voluntary and involuntary action. We are ignorant of the involuntary action. No? We are not at all aware that the heart is beating, or that the liver is working, or the stomach is working, or the blood is flowing. We are not conscious. Okay? And there are so many other things in the physical world also which are not conscious. We don't know, for instance, when a storm comes, you know that the storm has come. But 5 days before that, the storm is actually in the sea, but we don't see it. So there is a lot of ignorance. Okay? So This is what he is saying slowly. And we'll now read each sentence and see what he has to say. We have got the basic idea. Now we will see what he is saying. Okay? So I go back to the beginning of the paragraph. 593. We will continue the discussion in the next para, but this para, now, I am reading each sentence. But here, a question may arise. Since there is a passivity in existence and in nature, as well as an activity, immobile status as well as kinesis. Okay? But the proportions go on changing between the movement and the static condition. As I told you just now, when I am running, I am conscious that there is a movement, very, very conscious movement. When I am thinking also, there is movement in the mind. Okay? When I am sleeping, you may feel that there is no movement in the body. But there is a movement, and both are there at the same time, but in different proportions. Okay? So that's what he's saying. So, there is a passivity in existence and in nature. Existence means at the highest level. Okay? In existence with an E cap, he means at the highest level Sat. So in Sat, there is passivity, and there is passivity also in nature. But there is also an activity, immobile status as well as kinesis. At the higher level, in Satchidananda, there is mainly passivity, but doesn't mean to say that force is not there. Force is there, but it is held back. Okay? And in nature, we see that mostly it is activity, but the silence is held back. It is not that there is no silence. Okay? That's what he's saying. So, in existence and nature. Existence, higher level, nature, lower level. Clear? As well as an activity, lower level means in the physical world. As well as an activity. Immobile status as well as kinesis. Kinesis means activity, power. Okay? What is the place and role of this force? This power and its concentration in regard to the status where there is no play of energy, where all is immobile. So, this question is asking. He is saying, there where there is no mobility, where there is, what is this force doing? Okay, so what is the place and role of this force, this power, and its concentration in regard to a status where there is no play of energy, where all is immobile? Okay? It is there both in the physical world as well as above. Versus when you are in the self, the Brahmic consciousness, there doesn't seem to be any force. But we have seen that it is held back. The force is there but held back. In ourselves, we habitually associate our tapas, the movement, okay, our conscious force, with active consciousness, with energy in play, and in internal or external act and motion. So both the things are there. Okay? Within and without, also, whenever we think of the force, it is activity. The force is active. It's not silent. Okay? That which is passive in us produces no action or only an involuntary or mechanical action. So, just because we think that we are not running or we are not thinking, okay, but there is a movement which is going on. All the involuntary movement is a play of the tapas, of the force. You are not conscious of it, but it is there. Okay, that's what he's saying. Okay. Our conscious force is active. Consciousness with energy in play and in internal and external act and motion. External also and internal thinking, willing, okay, desiring, all this also is motion. That which is passive in us produces no action or only an involuntary or mechanical action. Mechanical, okay? The heart is mechanically working. Okay? All the organs are working mechanically within us. And we do not associate it with our will or conscious force. We don't associate it with our will and conscious force. But that's not always true, huh? Because we know that, for instance, I'm not willing that my heart should work, but it is working. So it's involuntary. But can I make that voluntary? Now we know very well that the yogi can do that. He can actually control his heartbeats. He can bring it down. He can bring down the pulse rate to a very low level. Okay? That he can do. He can also suspend his breathing. Okay? Breathing is the activity, but he can make it non-active. So these constantly there is movement. And if you see carefully, you will see that you're going back to Chit and Shakti. Okay? And which can be interpreted as knowledge and will. Okay? So this slowly you are seeing now the connection between activity and force and ignorance. That's what you will slowly see. And you will see that there is consciousness which is passive and it is going to give you knowledge. So this is the connection he is going to make. In ourselves, we read that just now. Okay? That which is passive in us produces no action or only an involuntary or mechanical action, and we do not associate it with our will or conscious will. Still, since there is there too the possibility of action or the emergence of an automatic activity, it must have at least a passively responsive or automatic conscious force in it. Okay, so there is a force, but it is held back. Or there is in it either a secretly positive or a negative and inverse tapas. What do you mean by secret, negative, or inverse tapas? Tapas is not producing action. When it is producing action, it is positive. But negative means it is not producing action, but it is there, but not producing action. Okay? That is calling it inverse or negative. It may also be that there is a larger conscious force, power of will in our being, unknown to us, which is behind this involuntary action. There is something, a very great power behind, which is causing this movement. In fact, we know that the divine presence is there within us. Okay? If not a will, at least a force of some kind, which itself initiates action or else responds to the contacts, suggestions, stimulations of the universal energy. The universal energy is interacting with us at all times. At the physical level, it is interacting consciously sometimes when we eat, but unconsciously sometimes when we breathe in energy, it is unconscious. Okay, it is involuntary, but still the movement is there. Okay, in nature also, we know that things stable, inert or passive, are yet maintained in their energy by secret and unceasing motion. There is constant motion. We get the example of atomic movement in matter. Matter seems to be stationary and non-moving, but there is energy. Okay. Then again, I gave you the example of the Himalayas, which seems to be static, but actually there is a movement going on. The tectonic plates, they crash against each other and the mountain rising. But rising so slowly that we don't see it. Again, the blooming of the flower. We don't see it, but it is there. And you can actually see it when you do time-lapse photography, as I said. So both the things are there everywhere, at the highest level as well as the lowest level. Activity and non-activity. Silence and dynamism. Both are there everywhere in different proportions. That's what Srimad is slowly revealing to us. Okay? So here too then, all is due to the presence of Shakti, to action of its power and concentration. It's tapas. Okay? Everything is there. The tapas is acting and also silent. But beyond this relative aspect of status and timelessness, we find that we have the power to arrive at what seems to us an absolute passivity or immobility of our consciousness in which we cease from all mental and physical activity. This is the aim of all yoga, to silence our mind, silence our vital, and also develop the possibility of keeping your the body absolutely still. Okay? The heart may go on, but it is still. The body is still. So there seemed then to be an active consciousness in which consciousness works as an energy, throwing up knowledge and activity out of itself, and of which, therefore, tapas is the character. And a passive consciousness in which consciousness does not act as an energy, but only exists as a status, and of which, therefore, absence of tapas or force in action is a character. So, it's clear, no? What he's saying, in both, above as well as in spirit as well as in matter, both the things are there, activity and non-activity. Okay? It's not that you see or not seeing is not the question. Both are there in different proportions. Is the apparent absence of tapas in this state? Now he's asking a question. Okay? Is the apparent absence of tapas in this state? Which state? The Brahmic consciousness. When we have silenced our mind. What is tapas doing there? Is the apparent absence of tapas in this state real? Or is there an effective, just one second. Or is there such an effective distinction in Satchidananda? That's what he's asking. It is affirmed that there is the dual status of Brahman, quiescent and creative, is indeed one of the most important distinctions, most important and fruitful distinctions in Indian philosophy. It is, besides, a fact of spiritual experience. We see that there is Saguna and Nirguna. The Saguna is movement. You see the physical world with characteristics. And Nirguna, a total absence of movement. Nirguna, the total absence of movement. This is what he said in the paragraph. Okay? We gave a lot of examples to show that it is there everywhere. In the physical world, movement is very obvious, but static condition is there, but we don't see it. Okay? And in the higher level, the static condition is more obvious, but creative action is there, but we don't normally see it in spiritual experience. When you are in the Brahmic consciousness, you feel that you are absolutely static. All the movement is in the physical world, but not in you. So here is the opposite. Now we can go to the next paragraph. Oh, 8:36. We have only 4 minutes left. But let's see how big the paragraph. Then we can do it. Or we can do another thing. If there's any question about this or is not clear, we can discuss it. Yeah.
Rangada,
Yes, tell me.
there is this thing that the absence of tapas or force in action. So what do you mean by tapas? There is a fifth line, last fifth line.
Yeah.
There is a therefore absence of tapas or force in action. So tapas means not a person.
No. Tapas is the heat. The
Heat.
force.
Okay.
Tapas is the heat. When you concentrate, there is a heat produced. No? As I told you, he has given you the idea of incubation yesterday. You were there in yesterday's class, Shilpa?
No, but because of Raksha Bandhan, I couldn't attend.
Oh, that is why. You read the previous para, incubation. Okay? So, he gave the example of incubation. Suppose a bird lays an egg, okay? And that egg doesn't seem to be moving. No? There's nothing in it. But inside, there is a slow movement and the bird is taking shape. But to help that, the bird sits on it, gives it heat. So heat produces is creative. So when he
Ah.
talks tapas, Arthaveda, 26, 28 நாட்டாட்சி போட்டேன் ஆனா அடுத்த வீட்டுல இருக்கேன் நான் இவன் இங்கே போயிருப்பேன் அங்கேயே போயிருப்பேன் சொல்றது புரியுதா
Shilpa, yesterday we had discussed tapas quite in detail. You listened to the yesterday's recording.
Okay. Sure, sure.
Yeah. And
That's why I was very
yesterday's
confused.
paragraph tapas was there in footnote. We had discussed quite a lot in that.
Okay, okay, sure, I'll do it.
Yeah. So tapas is Shiva. Tapas is heat. When there is movement, there is heat. Okay? And when you want to create, the force concentrates and it creates. In ourselves also we have seen that when we concentrate, okay, then there is a heat produced. Anything that you compress, the heat is produced. That we know that. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you read the previous paragraph.
Yes,
In
yes.
it talks about
Okay.
incubation. Incubation.
That
Sure.
is exactly what I told her. Yesterday's class.
Right.
Yes.
Because she wasn't there yesterday. Raksha Bandhan.
Yes.
We are all brothers and sisters. Okay. In fact, all of you are sisters to me, elder sisters
Then we could have come then.
and younger sisters. Okay. So see you tomorrow for the
Live synthesis.
okay. Correct. And Saturday we will have SUM.
Reciprocal.
Okay.
Ragada.
Au revoir. Goodbye, everybody.